Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest has the distinction of having been the personal assistant for one of the greatest legendary stage and screen goddesses of all time, Mae West, for the last decade of her life. Although she died in 1980 at the age of 87 after a career that spanned 7 decades, Mae West is still one of the most innovative and controversial entertainers in the history of show business because she was always way ahead of her time. She wrote and starred in her own plays, including the 1926 Broadway show Sex, that landed her in jail on charges of corrupting the morals of young people. In blockbuster movies such as She Done Him Wrong, Klondike Annie, and My Little Chickadee, she was known for her breezy sexual independence and her lighthearted, naughty double entendres. She was an industry powerhouse and the second highest paid actor in Hollywood back in the 1930s. She was also an early supporter of the feminist movement and the gay rights movement. As Mae West famously said, "When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better." And no one knew her better than our guest, Tim Malachosky. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tim, is it true that Mae West hired you to be her assistant after you wrote her a fan letter in 1969?
Yes, it first started out as a friendship, and then probably within a year, she actually called and asked me if I would be her assistant, as her previous assistant had left. And I said, yes.
Well, what in the world did you say in that fan letter that touched her so deeply?
I don't know, because I still have the letter, and it's really kind of stupid. It's like any fan letter. It's like, as a kid. And years later, I asked her, I said, why, out of all the letters and mail you received, you chose mine? And she said, it's just a feeling that she had. Because she's very much into this ESP and psychic phenomena.
Was it easy to become friends with her after you met her?
It was actually, I was so nervous. And, I think back, every day I was with her, I still would get like the chills and knots in the stomach. But as soon as you get to see her, she had this calmness about her that would ease you.
Can you take us back to the day you met her for the first time? What was it like?
Oh gosh. The first day I met her, she invited me to her Santa Monica beach house for an ESP gathering with her psychic, Dr. Richard Ireland. So I went, and he did his little demonstration. And then afterwards, she would sit in the dining room, and the dining room had a glass partition that looked out to the living room. So she would sit in there and watch. And then afterwards, everybody would go in and greet her. So I waited till I was the very last person. And I go in and I said, I'm Tim Malachosky. And she said, oh, I'm so glad to meet you. And, it was dark, and she like lit up the room. She just had this persona about her aura or something just lit up. And we talked for a few minutes, and she was telling me that particular day she had just finished filming for Myra Breckenridge the song Hard to Handle. And so she talked to me about that. And then she just basically said, well, give me a call. I'm in the phone book. And so I thought, I waited a few days, and I thought, oh, she's not going to remember who I am. So I called, and the number was to the Ravenswood switchboard. So they would screen calls. And so the lady said, who's calling? And I said who I was. And I thought, that'll be the end of it. And then she comes back on the line and she says, go ahead. And then we just started talking, and it was from there on.
And what do you think it was about you that drew her to you? I mean, I know you said that she was instinctive, but knowing her as well as you did and knowing yourself as well as you do, what do you think she was looking for in an assistant?
I think she was just basically looking for somebody that she could kind of groom, and somebody that wasn't, how do I say, overly pushy and aggressive, because I noticed, with me around her, everything was fine. We never had any problems, and she pretty much considered me part of her family. I spent holidays with her. I spent almost every day with her.
Well, what were some of your duties as her assistant?
I answered all the fan mail, and that could be a hefty chore in itself because she could get anywhere from 2 to 3,000 letters a week. And
Really? And then did she ever see any of that fan mail?
oh yeah, I mean, I'd sit there and read fan mail to her. She would sign autographs. I never signed anything because she had a very unique signature, and you can't copy that signature. So she signed everything for sure. And I would be there for interviews, like an escort with her, different places. I would be like personal shopper sometimes, and just kind of an all around companion.
Well, we all know the Mae West screen persona, the witty, sexually charged vamp. But what was she really like when she wasn't being Mae West the star?
Well, that's very hard because she was Mae West star, even in private. I mean, it'd be funny sitting there watching TV with her or something, or in the car driving, and she'd just look at a sign or something, and she'd come out with one of her zinger lines. It was She was incredible. And as far as laying, people say, "Well, was she around the house? Just what was she wearing, and did she wear makeup?" And it's like, yes, she always had her makeup on. She probably the most down dress that she would be a pantsuit or a negligee. But if she's going out to an event, it'd be an evening gown.
Now, when you look at this incredible woman, she was brilliant. She
Yes.
was very, very astute about the business. She was a
Yes.
smart businesswoman, but she never really evolved in terms of her image. I mean, well into her 80s, she was still being the same Mae West that she was in her 30s. Why do you think she never kind of evolved into a more modern person? Because she certainly had the intelligence to do it.
Well, she tried to keep up with the times, but a lot of people, like the press, when they would come to interview her and everything, they would think that she was delusional because she still was the Mae West character from all those years. But they didn't understand that that's who she was and that's who she portrayed. So part of her is Mae West, the private person, and Mae West, the screen personality.
Were they the same personality?
Pretty close, yes.
That's very, very unusual to think that that kind of, the wit and that kind of presentation of being very sexually charged was actually really her, even in her 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think she had a happy personal life?
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. She had so much triumphs in her life. And a lot of people say they think being a star of that quantity is very easy. It's not. She fought her way to get where she was. And that's why she was so adamant when people tried to use her image or Diamond Lil, she had that copyrighted. And so that's why she would get upset when people would try to use that to benefit themselves and not pay her royalties or anything, because that's something she created. She created Mae West, the character. She created Diamond Lil.
Oh, absolutely. And what about her romantic life? Do you think she was fulfilled and happy? Was she really loved by the men that she got involved with?
Yes. I know there was one time we were sitting in the limousine and a man crossed the street and she said, "Oh, that looks like this guy that she said, that's one guy I really was in love with." But she said, I had to break it off because he was involved in the mafia. And she said, and I did not want to get attached to that. And but she said that's one romance that could have been fulfilled.
Did she regret not having had children, do you think?
No, she said at that point in her life, you either have children or a career. She said you can't do both because one or the other is going to suffer. And she said at that time in her life, her career was the most important thing to her.
After her mother died, Mae West became fascinated with ESP and psychic phenomena and the afterlife. Why was that, Tim?
She was, her mother was her closest friend. She loved her mother. Her mother loved her. Her mother did whatever she thought her daughter wanted. And she supported her, not financially, but supported her. And when she passed away, she was just devastated. And she said for a long time, she said it took her about a year. And then she started thinking her mother would want her to move on, with her career. She said that she regretted that she didn't get to see her in pictures, but her mother knew that she was headed that way. And so that's why she wanted to kind of she wanted to know if there is an afterlife. And so that's why she really got into that.
Do you think she ever got the answers that she was looking for?
Yes. Yes.
And what were those answers? What did she discover from all of that exploration into ESP and psychic phenomena?
Well, she got that you have spirit guides. She said one time that she was learning from a yoga, and one time she would meditate at home, and one time she was laying in bed, falling asleep, and then in the middle of the night she gets woke up to this chanting, and then she looks and there's all these hooded monk-like people standing around her, and they're all chanting. And she said, and this would go on night after night after night. And she said, finally, she said, look, guys, I know you're real, but I need my sleep. So can you knock it off? And they stopped.
She told you this.
Yes. And then she told me one time she was sitting in her living room watching TV, and she saw something just caught her attention, and she turned to look, and it was her psychic, Reverend Jack Kelly, sitting there. He had already passed, and she said he was sitting there dressed in full dress tuxedo. And she said it startled her, so she called for Paul, and by the time Paul got there, he was dissolved into the floor.
Wow. So, in all the time since she's passed, have you felt her presence?
Oh, yes. At certain times, you get kind of, in this life, you get a little down, and I get strong whiff of her perfume.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Has she ever communicated with you since she passed?
In dreams, I will get dreams with her. Because I have a huge Mae West collection, and she came to me in a dream and she said, I brought all these things to you for a purpose. And she said, you've cared for them and taken, really good care of them. She said, now's the time to pass them on to others to enjoy. And she said, keep what you think is most important to you, but let go of some of it. So then I auctioned off a bunch of things. And some of the
Yes.
fans were so excited to, be able to have something of hers.
Now, Mae West wrote two books. Goodness Had Nothing to Do with It in 1959, and Mae West, Sex, Health, and ESP in 1975. It's very
Yes.
noticeable that her views about homosexuality and gay rights changed from her first book to her second book. Did you ever find out why she made disparaging comments about gay people in the first book?
She always supported the gay community because she did the play The Drag back in the 20s. And when it was going to come to New York, the New York, they actually came to her and said, please don't bring it to New York because we aren't equipped to handle all of the reaction it would have. So she didn't bring it to New York, and then she, I think, just did it out of town. But she did support the gay community a lot.
So did you ever ask her why in the first book she made negative comments about gay people?
I never did, because I don't remember seeing negative comments.
Oh yeah, it's there. But in the second book, there's a total difference.
Yes, yes.
Now, you published a beautiful book about Mae West in 1993 to commemorate her 100th birthday. That was a real labor of love. There were only 2,000 copies printed. Now the book is a collector's item. I've been trying to get my hands on one for years. Why didn't you have more copies made, Tim?
It was a difficult time because I could not find a publisher. I had to self-publish it because a regular publisher didn't get my concept. They wanted a biography. Well, I wanted a picture book, and my book has little stories from my diaries. And they thought it needed to be more biographical and not as many photographs. And I thought, that's not what I want. And if you read the book, the way I wrote it, because a lot of the words are misspelled, because that's how she told me the story. Well, they wanted to correct all the grammar, and I didn't want that because the first book that came, I let my mother read it, and my mother said, she read the first chapter and she said, I can't read it anymore. And I said, why? And she said, because it's like she's sitting there talking to me. And I said, good, that's how I wanted it to come. That's what I wanted. But none of the publishers could get my point.
Is there any chance you'll publish more copies?
I don't know, maybe. If I can find somebody that will do it.
Well, maybe this interview will make that happen because I'm dying to get my hands on a copy. Now, Tim, do you have a favorite Mae West movie?
Well, I like them all, but I would say Belle of the 90s is one of my favorites because that's the very first movie I saw her in. But I do like She Done 'Em Wrong and I'm No Angel.
Did Mae West have a favorite film of hers?
I think it was She Done 'Em Wrong because She Done 'Em Wrong is the movie version of Diamond Lil.
Right, right. Did she watch herself on TV from time to time?
Yes, yes. She also had a 16 millimeter print of She Done 'Em Wrong, and I had a movie projector, so I would go and run it. And then she also had the excerpt from the Academy Awards show, and I would run that for her too, where she sang with Rock Hudson.
Do you think she was happy with the career she had? Because she didn't I think she made 12 movies.
Yes. I think at the time, because it was getting too difficult to come up with movie scripts and having the censors, deal with the censors. And she said that she knew that was the time to stop and go back to the theater because she loved the theater. She loved the immediate response of the audience. And so that was her choice.
Did she have a favorite co-star?
I don't think so. I mean, she liked Cary Grant, but I don't think Cary Grant cared for her.
Did you ever, in those 10 years that you were with her, get the sense that she was socializing with other Hollywood stars? I mean, was she part of that circle of famous people?
She didn't socialize a lot. I mean, she did meet Greta Garbo. She met Betty Davis a couple times. I know Burt Reynolds came to the apartment. But as far as parties and things, she wasn't a real party person. She didn't like that. She said, I'd rather spend my time at home creating work and creating books and manuscripts.
Well, you mentioned Betty Davis. There's a famous film made in 2014 called When Betty Met Mae, based on the tape-recorded conversation between Betty Davis and Mae West when they met at a dinner party. Were you at that party, Tim?
No, I wasn't.
What did Mae West think of Betty Davis?
Oh, she thought she was fine. Yeah, they were two important women in the business. I think Mae West was more business savvy than Betty was, because I think Betty got taken advantage of a lot by Warner's, but Mae West pretty much called her own shots.
Which was incredibly unique in those days for a woman.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
So why weren't you at that dinner, Tim?
I wasn't invited.
That would have been an evening you would never have forgotten.
I know.
Well, did Mae West ever tell you what she thought of other female sex symbols like Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield?
Marilyn Monroe, she thought she had the talent, but it wasn't utilized. And Jane Mansfield, she really didn't care for.
Do you think that Mae West could have helped Marilyn Monroe to exercise more control over her career?
Well, they were at different studios, and they never even met. So I don't think that connection would have ever been made.
Now, in 1982, Anne Gillian starred in a TV movie about Mae West. I'm wondering if you saw it and what you thought of it.
There was a lot of false information there.
Really? Like what?
Well, especially at the end of the movie where she, kind of starts like she's going to cry at the end of the movie. And it's like Mae West never cried over any man. And there's certain other aspects of the film that weren't really authentic. Now, I like Anne Gillian, but I don't think she was able to hold the character. Her character kind of changed over different scenes. Because a few times she's kind of like Jean Harlow. A few times she's a little like Alice Faye. So it's hard to stay in character.
Did you ever consider writing your own book about your experience working with her? Because your picture book is really anecdotal.
Yes.
But what about a memoir of your time as her assistant and the way, for example, Betty Davis's assistant, Catherine Cermak, wrote a book about working for Betty Davis. Why haven't you done the same?
Well, it's just getting in the mood to sit down and write. And for me to just sit and write, it's difficult. I need people to ask questions, and then I can elaborate on that, and then do some research in my diaries and things to really format everything. So it's a little difficult, but I am considering it.
Wow, when I come down to California, I might be the person to sit down with you and draw all that information out of you, because this is part of Hollywood history that will disappear if someone doesn't get it all down.
Yes, that's true.
It's one of the reasons I so much wanted to have you on our show, because you knew this legend in a way that really no one else who's living today ever did.
Yes, that's true. And there's not very many of us left. There's only like one or two of us that are left. And I basically knew her on a day-to-day basis. And the other gentleman is Kevin Thomas, and he knew her more on a social basis.
Mae West was known to be incredibly loyal to her fans. I've read that she would go out of her way to sign autographs and even meet fans in person. And you've mentioned that her phone number was actually in the phone book. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. But like I said, it would go to the switchboard, and she had her own private line that, she kept, because she talked to her sister and things. She would go out of her way. There was times that we were in, for instance, Paul would pick me up, and we would go to the grocery store, and he'd be in the store buying groceries, and somebody would recognize. There was this woman that came, and she recognized Miss West in the back of the car, and she had a script she wanted Miss West to read, and I got out of the car and explained to her, you have to send it to the William Morris Agency and blah, blah, blah. So then next thing I know, she goes in the grocery store and tells everybody, Mae West is out there. So there's like 100 people come out of the grocery store and line up. And so I was in the back with her, and we had this little lap tray, And we always carried photos. So she would sign it and I'd stand it out the window, but she signed every one. She said, the day they stop asking is the day that my popularity is gone. She said, if it wasn't for the fans, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Wow, I just love to hear that appreciation for her fans. You don't often see that now.
No, not at all. Mm-mm. No, even if we were out, sometimes we would go for a walk on the beach in Santa Monica, and we said, "Oh, let's put a black wig on you." So we put on a black wig, and we'd be walking out, and everybody go back, "Oh, look, there's Mae West wearing black hair," and I'm going, "Okay, so much for the disguise."
Did she like being recognized in the street and in restaurants and on the beach?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Who wouldn't? And they always ask for autographs. If we were eating dinner, we would ask for them to wait until we were done. But she had no problem signing.
I have to tell you, I sent Mae West a fan letter when I was very young, and I got back a beautiful picture, and she signed it Sin-Searly.
Yes. She would sign them either best wishes, sincerely, or sensationally.
She was quite amazing.
Yeah, she was neat.
A lot of people may not know that Mae West was very generous. She gave to a lot of charities and she helped a lot of people financially who were down and out. Isn't that right?
Oh, yes, definitely. But she never bragged on it.
But you
She
knew.
broke up. Yes. Yes. If she was traveling with a show, she would always donate money to a church. And if there were people that she had previously worked with in the theater and they were down and out and needed a job or something, she'd always find them a job. Or like she knew Eva Tangway, and Eva Tangway was very ill and had no income. So she would pay for her doctors, give her money to live on, and she was helpful.
Whatever happened to the money from her estate?
Her estate was a trust fund through the bank. She had only a few survivors, and then a lot went to different charities. There was the Heart Association, the Blind, the Motion Picture Home. And then, of course, she, had all those investment properties. There's still money coming in to the estate. So, like, that money still goes to those charities.
Well, that's really wonderful. I had no idea.
Yeah, yeah. She owned a lot of property in the San Fernando Valley.
What do you think Mae West would have thought about the nudity that we see in films today?
No, she didn't like that then when it first was starting. She said, I can do more with my clothes on than with them off. She said, you got to leave a little to imagination. And it's like, boy, not today.
Now, Mae West is one of the most imitated movie stars by drag queens. She even wrote a play in 1927 called The Drag. What did she think of all those female impersonators who imitated her?
Well, she said some of them do the best job. She said as long as they don't use her material, if they use their own material, she's fine with that. But then if you start quoting all of her stuff and make a profit off of it, then she'd be upset. I know that there was the one, Craig Russell, that she pretty much had a run-in with. He was the Canadian president of her fan club. And so he basically came down and stayed at her house in Santa Monica. And there was some issues and she kind of backed off from him. And then he started to do impersonations of her. And she specifically asked him not to do that. And because sometimes he would get kind of vulgar. And that's one thing she doesn't like is the vulgarity. And he wouldn't stop. So.
Well, he really played her in a movie called Outrageous.
Yes, yes.
Did you see the movie?
Yes. Uh-huh. I met him one time.
What did you think of Craig Russell's portrayal of Mae West in Outrageous?
I thought it was overly exaggerated.
Is it true that Mae West was in the process of writing another book when she died?
Yes, she was. She was writing a book on Reverend Jack Kelly, her psychic. And I was supposed to go over the manuscript. It was done. It just needed to be proofread and edited. But that never got done. And I don't know what happened to the manuscript.
You don't know who has it?
No.
Oh, that's a shame. Now, you were with Mae West right to the end. Her passing must have been devastating to you, Tim.
It was. It was very devastating. It took me a long time to get over that. It wasn't easy. And, I think she kind of taught me over the years, be cautious who you have around you because they're only going to, she was very good at that. But unfortunately, I didn't learn that. And so people I thought were my friends weren't there anymore because I didn't have that connection anymore.
Really?
Yeah. It just makes you really leery of people. What do you want?
Did people try to get close to you because you were friends with her?
Yes. Yes.
And then after she died, they kind of dumped you?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what kind of work did you do after you stopped working for Mae?
Oh gosh, I thought about doing another job as an assistant to somebody else, but I really couldn't find anybody that. I mean, she was so unique, and we bonded so well that I just couldn't think of. So I did a little of everything. I mean, I did whatever I had to do to survive. I worked in antique stores. I worked in costume shops. I did all kinds of things.
I would have thought that working for her for the last 10 years of her life, and given how wealthy she was, that she would have taken care of you in her will.
Well, the thing with the will was written in 1965 before I came around. And I would say probably the last year, she kept telling me to remind Paul, her bodyguard, to call her lawyer. She wanted to change her will. I kept reminding him, but he never did. And so it never got changed. And it would have been to his benefit too, because he probably would have gotten everything. And it ended up that he had to sue the estate to get money from the estate.
Did he win?
Yes, he did.
Oh, I feel bad, Tim, that nothing was left for you when you were such a good friend.
Well, I think that's why she made all these treasures come around for me so that I could eventually sell them.
Yes, in 2019, there was an auction, a very highly publicized auction of some of her most
Yes.
famous costumes and other memorabilia that you owned and you sold.
Yes, correct. At Julian's, yes.
Did any of her things end up in the Hollywood Museum or the Smithsonian or any of the big museums?
No. I did donate one gown to the Fashion Institute Museum. It was a gown designed by Travis Banton in 1933. She wore it to the premiere of I'm No Angel, and then she used it in her film Going to Town in 1935. She kept that gown, and it was starting to deteriorate because it was lace and beaded. So I donated it to them, and they're going to restore it, and they will display it. So I'm excited for that.
I am
That's
too.
one piece that got saved. I do still have quite a few pieces. I have her original red Diamond Lil gown from the Diamond Lil revival. So I still have that. And if I can turn the camera and show you a gown that I have on display if you like.
Oh, that would be lovely. Let's see it. Oh my heavens, that's a very famous gown. What movie did she wear that in?
It's from Every Day's a Holiday, and
Yes.
it was designed by Schiaparelli.
Oh, that's
So it's
fabulous. Well, Tim, I have a very dear friend, Donnell Dadigan, who is the owner
uh-huh.
and president of the Hollywood Museum. And I'll bet you she would love it if you would donate something of Mae West to the Hollywood Museum. What do you think?
Well, actually, I did a big exhibit there for probably 3 years.
That's wonderful. Is it
Yeah.
is it fair to say that you've dedicated a great part of your life to honoring and preserving Mae West's legacy?
Yes, absolutely. Because she was so kind to me, I wanted to return the kindness however I could. And a lot of another reason I couldn't get my book published is because a lot of the publishers wanted dirt. And it's like, I really don't have anything negative to say about her. My
Well,
life with her was amazing.
now, if people can't get a copy of your book because it is out of print, is there another book about
Mhm.
Mae West that you would recommend to our viewers?
I would only recommend her autobiography because you're getting the real story. A lot of the other books, there's one, a biobibliography by Carol Ward that I think is pretty nice, pretty good. But a lot of the other ones, it's kind of a rehash of her stuff in her book with their own throw on it. And there's a lot of misinformation in a lot of the biographies too.
Well, what do
So
you
I
think is
like
the
it.
most misunderstood thing about Mae West?
Well, believe it or not, a lot of people are still speculating that Mae West was a man.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yes, and that kind of irritates me. And it's like, it's not true.
Is there anything else about her personality or her life that you think people don't really get that you'd like to clear up now?
I just would like everybody to know how talented she was, that she wrote her own plays, she wrote her own dialogue in the movies, and sometimes she even wrote the scripts. Most of the scripts she wrote. She published novels, she published Diamond Lil, she published Pleasure Man, and a book called The Constant Sinner that were from her plays she put in novel form. Very talented, very smart, very business savvy. She opened the doors for a lot of people in the industry. She did a lot for the Black people in the industry. She fought to get Duke Ellington into Belle of the 90s. And so she did a lot. She was they say an early feminist, but she was feminine.
She was a feminine feminist.
Yes. I just wish that she would have got some of the recognition that she deserved. The Academy never acknowledged her for anything. American Film Institute, none of them have ever done anything. And it's too bad because she was such a high impact and the highest paid woman in America in the 1930s.
And she was one of the first women, if not the first woman in the industry to show real
Yes.
independence and ownership of her own material and control over her own scripts and her
Yes.
own personal brand.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well,
Yes.
Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much for sharing your memories about the incredibly fabulous Mae West.
Well, thank you.
Our guest has been Mae West's personal assistant and dear friend, Tim Malachosky. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneinterviews.com.